So here we are, beginning day one on our Holy Week reflections. Just a short kind of couple of minutes of giving really a thought for the day based on significant events that take place in what Christians call Holy Week, which usually begins, of course, with Palm Sunday, which is taking place today as I'm recording this, and ends at Easter Sunday and all the events in between, and mark this very special week that is central to Christian faith and understanding the life of Jesus Christ, his death, and of course his resurrection. So today we've been thinking about Palm Sunday, and it seems like the obvious place to begin day one of 7 days that changed the world. One of the things I enjoyed doing was going to Edinburgh to see the Edinburgh Military Tattoo. I don't know if you've ever been there or you know of it, but there's kind of lots of parades, especially as the guardsmen and the horsemen, they begin to walk into a very tight space, with all of their playing of their instruments and the crowd celebrating and cheering along the way as they walk down from the Royal Mile into the gates of the castle, then come into the castle surroundings, and really within this kind of courtyard, as it were, they parade to a great celebration of the adoring packed crowds who are kind of waving their flags or waving their scarves or stamping their feet as a way of expressing their jubilation that something exceptional and beautiful has happened within this special event. In all 4 Gospels, they record what they call the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And I'm particularly fascinated with Mark's story because in Mark's story, Jesus isn't recorded as saying anything at all in the event. If we look at the other stories, there are some words for Jesus kind of prior and during and sometimes just immediately after the whole event. But Mark, typically true to himself, wants us to work out for ourselves who Jesus is, and often has Jesus saying, well, who do people actually say that I am? So therefore, in his story found in Mark 11, verses 1 to 11, he kind of teases with us a little bit as to who Jesus is by basically giving us clues as to what might be going on in this Palm Sunday event, and for us to kind of come to our own conclusion. In one sense, it's a very simple story. It's over in Mark's narrative very quickly. Basically, Jesus comes, rides on a donkey into Jerusalem, is celebrated, and that's kind of pretty much it until you begin to look a little bit deeper into what Mark has to say. There's more going on that meets the eye, which is always the case for anyone who reads Mark's gospel. There's kind of a narrative that is fairly basic to read, but then it has this very deeper substance that Mark alludes to by providing us little clues to try and work out what's really going on beneath the narrative and beneath the events they describe. There was a TV program on a few years ago called Through the Keyhole. I'm not sure it still meets, but the idea was you had to work out what was going on by clues that were placed along the way in the show, so that as each clue was given, you built up your picture as to who you think the celebrity was who lived in that famous house. And in a kind of similar way, Mark kind of writes to us in a way where we get these clues to work out what is going on in this like Palm Sunday incident with donkeys and palms and shouts and going into Jerusalem and people waving and like what's it all about? Well, Mark gives us a number of clues. Clue 1 is the destination is significant. I mean, Jesus is heading to Jerusalem, the capital of political power and the capital of religious power, and this is the crucial destination. It's where all the pilgrims go. It's where all the festivals take place. It's the holy city where God was believed to have dwelled in by the people who follow God. And so therefore we get this clue that he's going to Jerusalem and something significant is going to happen there. The second thing we get is that the route he takes is significant, for he climbs up the hill towards Jerusalem on the city and follows what's known as the pilgrim route. That is the route that all the people, all the Israelites, all the people who were proselytes at Judaism, all the people who were just nosy from across the world, came along this pilgrim route to kind of go up to Jerusalem, passing by Bethphage and Bethany, key little towns, and passing by the Mount of Olives, on what we would describe as a modern kind of pilgrimage, a kind of walk where pilgrims would go, following in the footsteps of their ancestors, in order to take some sacred purpose to experience something significant and spiritual as they head towards the holy city. So the route that Jesus took was this pilgrim's route. He was going as a pilgrim along this very well-known route that led into the city during these most special times. It's our second clue. Our third clue is to do with the mode of transport that Jesus took to get there. When I was watching the Military Tattoo, boy, they came sometimes in tanks, or they came sometimes in other armoured vehicles, or certainly when they came on Horse Guards Parade, they came on amazing stallions. But Jesus comes into this sacred city as a sacred person on the most humble mode of transport available. An unridden donkey, the foal of a donkey, like a colt, is what's described as. And the background to that means if it was unridden, it was probably set aside for sacred purposes, so there's a clue. And also if it was, known in the Old Testament that sometime a king might come to Jerusalem lowly on a colt of a foal of a donkey. And so we have this idea that a king would come to Jerusalem one day, and he would come on this kind of very humble mode of transport. And Mark is telling us this is what happens as Jesus comes to town. The people, I guess, at the day were hoping for someone who would be a warlord, someone who would come and kick the Romans out, someone who would use military power to kind of destroy the enemies of the people. And yet here troops Jesus into the city on this very basic mode of transport, but had some very Old Testament roots to it that indicated a different type of king and a different type of occasion. And yet within this we see kind of kingly authority also. Just the exchange of commands is quite significant in Mark's story. Basically, Jesus commands something and it happens. Like he tells the disciples to go into the village, and they go into the village, untie this donkey and bring it to him. They untie it and they bring it to him. He says, if anybody asks, who's it for? Just say to them, like, the master needs it. And this all plays out exactly as Jesus has foretold. And you get this idea that this very humble occasion is also taken over with an insight into something that's really authoritative by the person at the centre of the events. And so the authority here is significant even within this very basic story. Well, the demonstrations and actions that were shown were also very significant. And so we have groups of people who are waving palms and groups of people who are waving branches, people that are laying cloaks down like a royal procession, like a royal kind of person coming down, like a red carpet would be the equivalent perhaps of what we might see today. Here's a notoriety, a dignitary, someone who's well known in this whole region is coming into this place, and people are welcoming him as if they would a very special dignitary in the town. And also their words that they're shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna meaning save us, and they're quoting from the Old Testament scriptures, kind of words that are in Zechariah, and words that are from the Psalms that are all expressing something significant, that this is someone special coming to town. So like through the keyhole, we put all this stuff together in Mark's very basic narrative. I think there's two things that we learn. That actually Jesus is the king who's come to town. He is the one who's been the promised Messiah, but isn't coming as a military leader, but coming in peace and humility, with love and mercy and grace and justice. And his example of justice takes place within the very next story as he goes and he kind of gets rid of all of those who are oppressing the poor, money changers in the temple, where they're exploiting people through commerce and trade, and just a whole religious center that should have been working for the people is working and oppressing the people. So Jesus comes as a very different type of Messiah, a very different king. He's the servant king, the humble king, the loving king, the king who is the fulfillment of God's promises, but one that does not dominate us or coerce us or force us or makes us do anything that we don't want to do against our will, but calls us, woos us, loves us, walks among us, and exemplifies the way of God, the way of humility, the way of peace, the way of justice, the way of righteousness. This is the story of Palm Sunday. So let's catch up tomorrow and see what we learn as the story develops going forward.